I never thought I'd be the type to get trapped in a toxic relationship, but here I am, completely drowning in something I never signed up for. It started out like a dream. My boyfriend Jake was charming, spontaneous, and so passionate. Every day with him felt like an adventure. He made me feel like the most beautiful, wanted woman in the world. But then, things started shifting. At first, it was small things. He'd ask who I was texting. He'd get weirdly quiet if I mentioned a male friend. I thought, okay, maybe he's just protective. Then one night, after a couple of drinks, he confessed that he didn't believe in male-female friendships, and that if I really loved him, I wouldn't entertain other men, even as friends. I laughed it off. It sounded ridiculous. But the next morning, I woke up to find he had gone through my phone while I was asleep. He was fuming, demanding explanations about every single guy I had in my contacts. Why do you still follow your ex on Instagram? Why are you liking his posts? I was so caught off guard. My ex and I ended on good terms. We never talk. We don't have history that I'd ever revisit. But Jake insisted that loyal girls erase their past. I refused to block my ex, not because I have feelings for him, but because I didn't like the idea of Jake controlling my friendships. That did not go over well. That night, Jake left my apartment without a word. He ignored my texts, calls, completely ghosted me for 48 hours. When he finally responded, it was a single message. "So you picked your ex over me. Cool." At this point, I should have ended it. But instead, I apologized. I told him I understood his feelings. I even started pulling away from my male friends just to make him feel secure. That's how it started, the slow unraveling of my independence. It got worse. Jake's jealousy turned into straight-up paranoia. He started showing up at my job unannounced, just to say hi. But really, he was checking to see if I was flirting with coworkers. If I didn't text back immediately, he'd accuse me of ignoring him. Then the sex started changing. In the beginning, he couldn't keep his hands off me. But now, he'd withhold intimacy like it was a punishment. One night, I initiated, trying to bring back the spark, and he flat out rejected me. "Not in the mood," he said, scrolling on his phone. But when I rolled over, I noticed he had Tinder downloaded. I confronted him. He laughed and said, "It's just an old app. Relax." I wasn't convinced, but I let it go. Again. Then came the real gut punch. A girl DM'd me on Instagram. I didn't know her, but she sent me screenshots messages from Jake to her. Flirty, suggestive, asking to hang out. My heart dropped. I confronted him, shaking with anger. His response? "Oh, so now you're snooping through my messages? I thought trust was important to you." I was speechless. He twisted it around so fast, made me feel like I was the crazy one for even bringing it up. I wanted to leave. I knew I should. But I was stuck in this toxic cycle of loving him, missing the way he used to be, hoping he'd change. Then, the final straw happened. One night, we were driving home, and I casually glanced out the window. He suddenly snapped, "Why are you staring at that guy?" I didn't even know what he was talking about. I hadn't seen anyone. But he wouldn't let it go. He spent the rest of the car ride in cold silence. When we got home, he slammed the door so hard our neighbor texted to check if I was okay. That was it. That was the moment I realized he's never going to change. He doesn't love me. He loves controlling me. So I did something I never thought I'd have the courage to do. I waited until he left for work, packed my bags, blocked his number, moved out of my apartment, and stayed with a friend in another city. And just like that, I was free. A week later, he showed up at my old place, banging on the door, demanding answers. My old roommate told him I was gone. I haven't spoken to him since.
I never thought my life would take a turn like this. My husband Jake and I already have 2 small kids, and my last pregnancy was tough, not just physically but emotionally. He just wasn't there for me the way I needed him to be, and now here I am again pregnant. completely unplanned, completely unprepared. I told him last night, and his reaction wasn't anger, wasn't excitement, it was nothing. He just sat there staring at me like I had just recited a grocery list instead of telling him we were having another child. Then, without a word, he got up, left the room, and never came back to bed. I spent the night tossing and turning, checking my phone, waiting for him to come back, but he never did. When morning came, I found him asleep on the couch like we were strangers living under the same roof. I tried to push past it. Maybe he just needed time. Maybe he was just overwhelmed. I mean, I was too, right? We hadn't planned for this. But the silence was unbearable. Then, today in the car, out of nowhere, he snapped at me. "Why are you staring at that guy smoking weed?" I blinked, confused. "What? What are you talking about?" "That guy in the car. You were staring at him." I hadn't seen any car. I hadn't seen any guy. I'd just been sitting there, lost in my own thoughts, thinking about how my husband had become a stranger overnight. I shook my head. "I have no idea what you're talking about. You were looking straight and moved your eyes. Don't act dumb." His voice was clipped, almost resentful, like he wanted me to admit to something that never happened. And before I could even process it, he went completely silent. He kept driving, his jaw tight, hands gripping the wheel like he was holding onto something bigger than just a steering wheel. By the time we got home, he still wasn't talking to me. He went straight to the bedroom, shut the door, and left me alone with our 2 kids. I felt lost. Nah, scratch that. I felt abandoned. But then something hit me. This wasn't just about the baby. This wasn't just about some imaginary guy in a car. Something was off. Something was different. He wasn't just distant, though, was acting guilty. A pit formed in my stomach, the kind that tells you the truth before you're ready to hear it. I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was just stressed. Maybe he was just processing. But my gut wouldn't let it go. And when you've been with someone long enough, you start to know the difference between something's wrong and something's wrong. I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I checked his phone, and that's when my world shattered. There were texts, not a ton, not enough to raise alarm bells to someone who wasn't looking, but just enough. Messages with someone named E. No profile picture, just an initial. Casual, harmless words on the surface, but the timestamps told another story. Late at night, when he should have been sleeping next to me. Early in the morning, before he even kissed me goodbye. The last message sent right after I told him I was pregnant. "Jake, I don't know what to do." I felt like I couldn't breathe. I scrolled up, my hands shaking. Nothing overtly damning. No, "I love you." No, "I can't wait to see you." But the way they talked, the way he opened up. He was sharing parts of himself with her that he hadn't shared with me in years. The weight of it crushed me. This wasn't just about the baby. This wasn't just about stress. This was betrayal in its rawest form, but I wasn't ready to explode, not yet. I needed to know who E was, and I needed to know how deep this went. That night, after he locked himself in the bedroom again, I did my own digging. I found out E wasn't some stranger. She wasn't some random coworker. She was his ex, the one before me, the one he swore was a mistake, the one he promised never meant anything. I sat there, my heart pounding in my chest, staring at my reflection in the darkened screen of my phone. I was pregnant. I was exhausted, and I was alone. So what now? Do I confront him? Do I act like nothing's wrong? Do I pretend I didn't see those messages and wait for him to tell me the truth on his own? Or do I make a plan? Because for the first time in a long time, I realized I wasn't just carrying another child. I was carrying the weight of a decision that would change my life forever.